at the center of ourselves or of the organization, whatever remains weak and unaddressed will always, at some point in time, affect us. And therefore, we must always have an eye out for that and try to find out what can be done about it. Last week was the introduction, where we saw that the results or the impact of any enterprise comes from the center. If the center is unstable, then the whole edifice is unstable. Now, we were focusing a lot, and we will be focusing a lot on the instability of Okonkwo, where we see that Okonkwo is a wonderful man. Okonkwo is a person who has achieved a lot of things, but at his center, Okonkwo is unstable. Remember, we read that perhaps down in his heart, Okonkwo was not a cruel man, but his whole life was dominated by fear, the fear of failure and of weakness. Now, with the entry of Ikemefuna into Okonkwo's household, what we saw in these chapters 7 to chapter 13 is that Ikemefuna has a stabilizing effect on Noe, Okonkwo's son. With Ikemefuna, Noe now spends more time in Okonkwo's obi, listening to stories of old. Even though Noe deep down really does enjoy the stories of fancy and fantasy that are usually told to small children by his mother, he now has to listen to the stories of courage, bravery, and bloodletting that Okonkwo wants to tell them. We are told about Noe, that is. And so he feigned that he no longer cared for women's stories. And when he did this, he saw that his father was pleased and no longer rebuked him or beat him. So Noe and Ikemefuna would listen to Okonkwo's stories about tribal wars or how years ago he had stalked his victim, overpowered him, and obtained his first human head. Ikemefuna was good for Okonkwo's household. And then one day, Ezeudu, who was the oldest man in this quarter of Omofia, who had been a great and fearless warrior in his time and was accorded great respect in all the clan. Ezeudu comes to Okonkwo and tells Okonkwo, "That boy calls you father. Do not bear a hand in his death." Yes, the oracle of the hills and the caves had pronounced that Ikemefuna has to be put to death. And all Okonkwo had to do was to perhaps agree to the death, but not take a hand in it as he's been advised to do by Ezeudu. But remember Okonkwo, remember his fear, and so what does Okonkwo decide to do? Okonkwo decides to not only agree to the killing of Ikemefuna, but to also go along with it. We are told, as the man who had cleared his throat drew up and raised his machete, Okonkwo looked away. He heard the blow. The pot fell and broke in the sand. He heard Ikemefuna cry, "My father, they have killed me," as he ran towards him. Dazed with fear, Okonkwo drew his machete and cut him down. He was afraid of being thought weak. And that's the thing we were saying earlier, isn't it? About the center being weak. So at this crucial moment when Okonkwo might have made a different decision, his fear flares up and makes him kill his son, because Ikemefuna really was his son. And Okonkwo had been treating him as his son. But he is scared. He is scared of what they are going to say. He is scared that they are going to think that he is weak. And so Okonkwo gives in to the fear and kills Ikemefuna. And the killing of Ikemefuna has an impact, obviously, not only on Okonkwo, because Okonkwo, we're told, couldn't sleep at night. He drank a lot. He seemed to be having nightmares. but the impact of the killing of Ikemefuna is also felt by Noe. Noe, we're told, as soon as his father walked in that night, Noe knew that Ikemefuna had been killed, and something seemed to give way inside him, like the snapping of a tightened bow. He did not cry, he just hung limp. And when we are looking back to find out what happened to Noe, at what point did Noe break? This is the point where Noe broke. When for no reason, or rather for a reason that Noe did not understand, the oracle decided that his brother Ikemefuna, who he loved so much, had to be killed. What do we see here? Okonkwo's fear, which has remained unchecked and uncontrolled and unaddressed, like any other weakness that we might have, at a crucial moment where he needed to make a decision, comes back to haunt him. And of course, then this then takes us back to the point that we're making. At the center of ourselves or of the organization, whatever remains weak and unaddressed will always at some point in time affect us. And therefore, we must always have an eye out for that and try to find out what can be done about it. But was there a different course of action that was open for Okonkwo? Yes, Ezeudu had already told him that that boy calls your father, you shouldn't take a hand in the killing of the boy. So that was one person, Ezeudu, who had told him that he doesn't have to do this. But the second person is Obierika. Obierika. A very wise man is this Obierika. He's the kind of person, when you think about getting older and when you think about growing in wisdom, Obierika is an example of what that would look like. Because Obierika not only lives in this environment where he understands the customs and what goes on, and obviously is a very respected member of that community, but Obierika is also a person who's given to critical thinking. He thinks about what's going on in his community and he asks important questions. So when Okonkwo says to him, I can't understand why you refuse to come with us to kill that boy, Obierika says, because I did not want to. And Okonkwo says to him, you sound as if you question the authority and the decision of the oracle who said he should die. And Obierika says, I do not. Why should I? But the oracle did not ask me to carry out its decision. So do you see how cleverly Obierika bypasses that decision? He says, okay, they can go ahead and do it, but I don't have to be the one to kill him. And Obierika then, you can tell, does not agree with what is being done. And so Obierika removes himself from that situation. And Obierika's position reminds me of something which was once said by Alexander Solzhenitsyn when he was talking about the strong hand of that government. And Solzhenitsyn says that sometimes they're bigger than us. They're much bigger than us, and it's very hard to fight these people. But one thing that you can do is that you can refuse to participate. And that is the wisdom of Obierika. Obierika refuses to participate. And that is an option that is always open for us, isn't it? That it is true, I might be too small, I might be too powerless to push back some of these systems. I might be too small to be able to prevent what is happening, but I don't have to participate. And like that, we can remove ourselves from that situation. And that's what Obierika decides to do. But Obierika goes on further to tell Okonkwo, you know very well, Okonkwo, that I'm not afraid of blood. And if anyone tells you that, he is telling a lie. What you have done will not please the earth. It is the kind of action for which the goddess wipes out whole families. And that comment about the goddess of the earth introduces a contradiction and a weakness which exists within Omofia. And the weakness is this. Look, The oracle had said that the boy must be killed. Obierika is saying that the goddess of the earth is going to wipe out whole families for what Okonkwo has done. So you see, there's this lack of clarity of which goddess are we going to obey here, right? There's this one saying this, and there's this other one saying that, and the rules are not very clear. And so this lack of clarity ultimately is going to affect the people who live in Umuofia. Okonkwo, poor Okonkwo, during Ezeudu's burial ceremony, his gun goes off and the bullet kills Ezeudu's son. And Okonkwo has to flee to his mother's village. Now, Okonkwo has to flee to his mother's village for an accident. And they say, well, it's because it was an accident, you don't have to be punished for it, but you have to go away. Otherwise, then the whole village is going to be cursed. And Obierika perhaps is the person best placed to help us think through what had just happened. And we are told, Obierika was a man who thought about things. A very important point here, that whenever something happens in our lives or around us, like Obierika, we need to pause and we need to think about what has just happened, rather than thinking that, well, it's one more thing, let's just carry on with life. So this is what Obierika does. After the burning of Okonkwo's homestead and Okonkwo's fleeing, Obierika stopped and thought. So, we're told, when the will of the goddess had been done, he sat down in his obi and mourned his friend's calamity. Why should a man suffer so grievously for an offense he had committed inadvertently? But although he thought for a long time, he found no answer. He was merely led into greater complexities. He remembered his wife's twin children whom he had thrown away. What crime had they committed? The earth had decreed that they were an offense on the land and must be destroyed. And if the clan did not exact punishment for an offense against the great goddess, her wrath was loosed on the land, and not just on the offender. As the elders had said, if one finger brought oil, it soiled the others. And so at the end of chapter 13, it ends with Okonkwo having to flee. And we also had an opportunity to now understand a little bit more about Umuofia. It's a village, of course, that is strong, and it is a great village, respected by all its neighbors, but it is not without its weaknesses. And one of the weaknesses of Umuofia are the gods that they worship, who give conflicting views. Also, that not all the people in Umuofia are happy with the state of play. Some of them do not agree with what the gods decree. And so this weakness within Umuofia is soon going to be felt later on in the book. So let's keep reading, and let's see what happens later on in the book. And do feel free to give me comments on what you think about, what we're talking about here, about wisdom, about critical thinking, and of course about how to have a strong center and the importance of this in any human being or in any society.